Hello, everyone. This is Ken Quigley from Keystroke, and this week we're going to be covering Link2surveys. This is our second last week. Next week we'll be doing Link2Chat. Now, I've been doing these webinars for quite some time, both in the recent sequence and in the past. Um, in the past, I've always tried to position these from a standalone commercial standpoint. Now we're entering a new era starting April 8th, where the commercial case for these is changing significantly, and I'll be covering that. Um, these are not something you're going to have to sell because they're going to be, many of these are going to be included free or have progressive more advanced features as you go up the tiers. So the case is very different than it's been in the past. But let's start off with, why people use surveys. And this is going to seem rudimentary for some people, but it's worth covering because, what we're going to be talking about to our customers is, the advantages of, forgive the pun, the advantages of switching over to Act Advantage. And, us being able to communicate on what the virtues are for each one of these, which will not be portrayed as programs so much as new features, is really important. And I'll give you an example. I had a customer this morning that called me rather irate, and they're a customer of a reseller, and complaining about their sales team being quite dissatisfied with ACT. And I was pretty surprised to hear that they were using Word and Excel for quoting, and they were complaining about about all the extra work that took. So I've got a meeting with that person next week to discuss link to quotes. Now this was a level of discontent that actually I would say rose to creating an account risk. So us knowing the talking points, why this is in people's business interest to kind of implement with their customers and their prospects is really important. Not so much from a technical standpoint always, but really to say, hey guys, you're getting this for free. This is why it's useful. Let me help you move forward with it. So the first thing is overall, surveys are an invaluable tool for any business or organization, and I say organization deliberately, seeking to understand the opinions and preferences of their customers. That's a bit of a duh. By leveraging survey data, decision makers can make informed decisions that will improve customer satisfaction levels and increase sales. So what I did this morning is I went into Chat GPT and I said, what are the top 10 industries that can benefit from online services? And this is what it spit out. Retail, gathering feedback on products, customer service, so on and so forth. Healthcare for patient satisfaction. Education, not so much relevant to us, but in some edge cases. Hospitality, we have lots of hospitality customers for us. Guest feedback, services, overall experience. Finance, this is probably, we got Scott Abood on the call, who deals primarily with finances. This is something where a lot of them actually have obligations to harvest customer feedback and things like that. Not always possible in an analog way, picking up the phone and calling. But if you can kind of gauge what people's feedback is, risk tolerance, things like that, with things like a survey, they can actually get a lot more information faster and easier. Okay. Telecommunication, oh, sorry, technology. We're all in that business, getting feedback, on new products, user experiences, user interface, things like that. Telecommunication, automotive, travel and tourism, and real estate. So a lot of the sectors that we're accustomed to servicing really can benefit from things like customer surveys. Now, 7 reasons why surveys should be integrated with a CRM. Well, they're easier to distribute to existing customers. New contacts are added to ACT and segmented automatically. So if you are distributing them to existing contacts, then they're going to update the existing contacts. If you're distributing these so that they can be, surfaced like in your signature or your website, then that's a little omnidirectional. You're not always going to know who's going to fill it out. So people that do get added to the database and their feedback recorded with that. Submission answers are written to the contact histories. Segmentation facilitates follow-up marketing. I'm going to show you some of that, where you can actually create segmentation based on their responding to the answer, to the survey, and segmentation based on how they respond. So if there is one particular question that you think is a real, a real tell in terms of their prospects as a lead for you, then you can actually say, if they answer this way to this particular question, put them in a particular group. Okay, so that way you get additional segmentation rather than, whoever just showed up. Okay, lead triggers can schedule follow-ups and act. You can create surveys for other act users. So let's say Don Egan wanted to create a survey for Tony. Okay, he can do that, create the whole survey, assign Tony to be the owner of it, and therefore all the follow-ups, all the responses, and everything would go to him as if he'd created it himself. Now, save money and time. This is really, really a new talking point that we haven't had before. And this is why I wanted to talk about, the advantages of, and I'm going to keep using that pun inadvertently, Act Advantage, including Link2Survey Standard, one per account for free, and Professional and Ultimate tiers, including Link2Survey Team License for every user for free. Take a look at what the individual SurveyMonkey accounts cost, starting at 45 to 134 per month, okay, for individual accounts, or team accounts for a minimum of 3 users, starting at 90 to 252. This is massive. Okay, so we're talking, and all of this is without any kind of Actor CRM integration. Okay, now let's talk about standard versus team, because people are going to say most of your guys are going to be at the standard tier because they're going to be migrating from $30 a month to $30 a month. They're going to say, well, what's all involved? What am I getting for, going up to $45 a month? Well, surveys is probably not the strongest argument for that, other than everyone is going to get a license. So it's things like full CRM integration included with both, unlimited surveys, questions, and responses included in both. And by the way, I'm including this as number 2, because if you go to things like SurveyMonkey and other servers, online services like that, they actually have a fixed limit of how many surveys, how many responses you can produce and receive annually. Okay. Full customization and security options for both. Skip logic, which is a very powerful tool, and I'll show you that in a minute. Okay. And answer summaries. Sandbox feature. This is really useful when you are, setting your triggers and trying to see if they're working properly. You can go back to your sandbox without generating responses and writing to your database over and over again and creating a lot of bogus data. Okay. Data exporting and detailed reporting. Create personal survey links. Now, you guys have seen me demonstrate this in the past, where I create a mail merge document with the mail merge tool, and I promise you sometime this year we'll probably be integrating it into AMA as well. But we basically send out an email, and it concatenates the contact GUID in with the survey link, so that when people get it and they click on it, it pre-populates their contact information. Okay, and obviously by doing that, that creates a greater likelihood that they'll complete it and you'll get the information that you want. But also, it will prevent people from changing the email address to something that you may not have a record of. Let's say you're used to them using their professional domain, they fill it out with their AOL account. It's never going to link to the same account. In fact, it will create a new contact record. So this isn't just about, reducing some of the barriers to completion, but also better data tracking. Okay. CRM workflow with automatic scheduling of follow-ups included with both. Link to shrink, team only, but frankly, with Advantage, it's going to be included with all. CC field to alert others of submission. So let's say I'm circulating a survey for support issues. I can do it myself. I can send it out, but I can have Lubs be CC'd on all the responses so he's aware of what's going on. Trigger drip campaigns upon survey completion. I'll show you how you can build. And I say drip campaigns, and that makes a lot of people think of AMA. There's actually drip marketing features right within Link2surveys and a few of our other team programs. And then finally, assigning another user as a campaign owner, which I mentioned. Okay, so let's get started with the demo. Okay, the first thing, after this, if you want to learn more or just refresh what we covered, obviously I'll send out a link to the recording, but just click on, go to linktivity.net, click on products, and select surveys, and you can review all the product information here. Okay. Now, just to reiterate what I was saying about the cost of SurveyMonkey, I mean, you can see the term, now it says $30, but starting at 3 users. So that's a minimum and it's billed annually. So suddenly that's $90 times 12. Same thing here, 84 times 3. If you look at the individual plans, you know, the minimum you're going to get is $45, okay, billed $540 annually. Suddenly people are paying more for surveys than they are for ACT, okay, or ACT Advantage. So this is, you know, being able to include this free and also include CRM integration, I think is a powerful upsell. And as I said at the beginning, sometimes it's important to socialize all of this information so people know the features available with ACT so they don't leave it, you know, in search of the same thing elsewhere. Okay. So let's go to, I'm going to just go to the home. Okay, going to home, I'm going to go into Link2surveys, which is currently the last one. Now, guys, much like AMA, by the time it launches, you're going to be able to access a lot of this. Your customers will be able to access a lot of this within the ACT Premium Cloud program itself. It is going to be set up in iframes similar to AMA. So you're not going to have to go to linktivity.net, which here is app.linktivity.net. The setup that we've built for them is called apc.linktivity.net, and it's going to work within iframes, and the fulfillment is going to be driven by the account information. Okay, so with that, let's go to Link2surveys. Now, the first thing that you're going to see is a list of all the surveys I've got here. Okay, you can search for specific ones here, okay, or you can filter by category, okay, submit to, auto follow up, or drip campaign. So show me all the ones with just drip campaigns. In this case, I'm going to be using one that's up near the top, which is the channel survey I circulated a while ago. But let's kind of understand what we're actually looking at, what each one of these columns or icons represent. So here is a preview of the survey. Now, this is not in sandbox mode, so you want to be careful about this, because in order to actually, you know, get through this, you're going to have to submit real data, which will write to the database. So when you're looking at this, just look at it for the first screen's sake. Okay, so this is the first screen's sake. You don't want to go any further because, as I said, you're not in sandbox mode and it will write to the database. Okay, so there's that. And then here is one of the things that is kind of understated is that we report on everything that you get as feedbacks. So here's an old survey from, I think, 2023. So it's not going to show any data until I click here, 2023, I apply, and I can now see all the feedback. So I sent this out. We can see that we got 9 responses. I can see the breakdown of each of the responses per question. Okay. Now, you guys are all database people. You understand that if you use drop-down menus, you're going to get very concise reporting. If you use memo fields, then you're going to get less exact. Now, here is a breakdown of it from a reporting standpoint. If you want to just look at the KPIs, one thing I just noticed this morning is that you've got to set the filter parameters in each screen. So you can go through here and see people's exact responses. Okay. And this can be exported as XLS or Excel files or CSVs, whichever you like. Okay, but that's kind of useful to know, in case other people in other departments, they want to see the results of the data. You can export that without, having to get them into this setup here. Okay, so you've got preview, you've got reporting. This is obviously edit. Okay, under here, you've got copy link, copy short URL, and duplicate survey, and then delete survey. So these first two are useful if you are, let's say someone emails you and says, hey, I didn't get the survey, being able to click on this and say copy short URL, you can reply in thread and just paste in the URL here. Duplicate is obviously if you want to create something similar, you don't want to go through and create all the shortcuts and everything else, okay? Or not shortcuts, triggers and pages and things like that. Okay, so this is obviously the enabled means it's live. Here's the name. Here's categories, which is optional. Here is the submit to. So here is the follow-up. Okay, so when you see a follow-up, this is the actual scheduled follow-up that you are triggering in Act. And D+1 means schedule 1 day afterwards. Okay, so if it's submitted on a Tuesday, you will see a scheduled activity on a Wednesday to follow up this submission. Okay, when you see here for the drip campaign, what this means is start the drip 2 days after. Okay, and then there's one email. Okay, that's it. All pretty self-explanatory. So let me just pause. Are there any questions at this point before we actually get into reviewing a survey? Other than from Robolards. Cool, because they're ignored. Okay, so now let's jump in. Here's the channel survey, okay, that I made, I think, a year ago, December. So let's go here. Now, a lot of these screens, especially the first screen and the theme screen, are going to seem very, very similar, okay, to what you've seen with forms and events. Now, I need some Jeopardy theme music to distract you from my very slow internet. Okay, so here we are. Okay, so we've got the tabs across the top. We've got the link to shrink here, which allows us to create a short user-friendly name. Okay, here is the name that we're getting it automatically, surveys.linktivity.net/channel. Okay, and this is where we set the name. If we want to give it a name like here, we're going to click on validate. Okay, let me just close my Outlook here because I'm getting a lot of noise from accepted emails. Okay, so this is where we get it. We click on validate. If you get a green window pop up here, click on save, and that name is yours for the survey. Okay, custom redirect. You can direct the user to a custom URL after they're completing. So if you've got a website answer page that is specific to a particular purpose, let's say it's a download page, you've made people say, hey, yes, I would like to try ACT, and they complete that form, you may want to immediately take them to the download page. Okay, that's what that's for. Obviously, this is for dressing it up, adding an image above the survey. Okay, footer text I find useful. And by the way, enabled in categories, these are all pretty self-evident. Here is the sandbox button up here in the preview. We'll get into that more later. Footer text is fairly self-explanatory, but if you've got any requirements, especially if you're in the UK, where you've got GDPR requirements, you can put in a footer text reassuring them that data like this can be redacted or removed or whichever. Okay, and then closing text, if you don't have a URL here, then this will be your answer page. Okay, so you can put in whatever you like. You can actually provide a link to another page, whatever suits your purpose. Okay, navigation here is show all pages. Okay, now the navigation I'm going to show you is like that top navigation menu, okay, where the line with a bunch of dots where it's going to show you all the pages. That is useful because I don't know if about you, but I get a little wary if I don't know how long a survey is. Sometimes they'll show me percentage of completion, other times they don't, and I have no idea how big the commit is. And if I don't, I'm just going to abandon it. Okay, so show all pages, show current and completed pages, and then hide navigation outright. I don't recommend that. Same reason that I won't commit to a survey if I don't know where the end is. Okay, hide survey title, that makes sense. Hide page title, I agree with that too. Hide linktivity branding. I'm imagining that ACT is going to get us to remove this altogether, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. Survey manager, basically, this is the user, okay, that all of the responses and all of the follow-up activities will by default go to. Okay, now allow passing in contact ID to skip filling in contact details for mail merge. This is what I was mentioning in the previous slides, where you can create a mail merge, okay, where it concatenates the link, the survey link with the contact GUID, and allows them, so when they click on that personalized link, it will pre-populate their contact details, and they can just start answering the questions. Okay, send submissions to, it always defaults to this, but now, unlike this one up here, in terms of survey manager, this can go to any user. Okay. This is copy submissions too. This was one of the team exclusive features where I can put in Michael's email and he'll be contacted. Assign contacts to group. This is the group for submissions. So anyone that completes this will go into this group. For follow-up, they can be added to an AMA group that automatically gets messaged if you've got list sync, however you want to do this. But there is an additional group, which I'll show you how you can use later. Okay. Automatically create follow-up activities with participants. When you click on this, okay, 0 days, schedule a call, it will automatically appear in your ACT database. If I put in 1, then it will be D plus 1. If I put in 0, it'll be D plus 0, so on and so forth. The appropriate time is going to be based entirely on the purpose of the survey. Now here, where you saw D plus 1, here is a drip, okay? The survey, this is the emails that I created separately. That's down here. You can click on here and go to the emails. And here, the 1 represents the day after the submission. So if you've got someone completing a customer satisfaction survey, you may want to send them an email the next day to say, hey, we offer all these other products and services, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's what that's for. Okay, up to the top, let's go to questions. Okay, now, it's important to understand that all surveys are divided up into basically 2 sections. One is the contact details, and 2 are the pages, okay, the pages containing the questions. Now, within the pages, you have got questions and triggers, okay? But the pages, if you fill out a web form, okay, like if I go back here, this is a web form, okay? There's no pages to cascade through or advance through. This is a web form, so there'll be 1 page. Now I can put in little bits of skip logic based on the technology available in Link2Forms, but I'm never going to have that workflow where it advances from one screen to the next, which is unique to surveys. Okay, and that's what each of those screens is represented in with the page. So the first thing, let's expand the fields here. So here's the questions. Now, I've told you guys this in past webinars. Make this as low a barrier to entry as possible. Name and email. That's it. That's all that Linktivity needs to identify a contact. Okay, and you see a little asterisk here. This will allow you to make sure that this is a mandatory field. So if I click on this, this is the field type. I've got all different kinds of field types: text, open-ended, drop-down, so on and so forth. We're really only going to cover these today, okay? Some of the data, internal, variable, and static, are much more relevant to forms because you don't typically surface a form or a survey within a web page. It doesn't have embedded HTML like this one does, where it's actually surfaced inside the page like the page content. The surveys, all you can do with the surveys is, have a hyperlink, which would launch it in another page. Okay, but here's the email label, answer hint, default answer. Like let's say that you're putting in country, you can put in Canada, USA, whichever, just to save people time. And then here's input required, okay, and then set as input, set as key field to looking up existing contacts. Obviously, this is only going to be checked once, and you're going to use this as typically a unique field for emails, okay? And then here is just layout functions. Do you want this to be 50% of the page width? Now, it's not talking mobile. When mobile, it will stack it regardless of what you put here, okay? But if on a tablet or desktop form factor, this is where you can, optimize the space and say, I want 50% for this, 50% for that, and, and remove some of the ugly stacking. 66%, 100%, so on and so forth. Okay, but those are typically the options on this. But as I said, the point of this is to, use as few as possible. All of these are enabled automatically, and then, you can just go like this to enable or disable them. Okay, so you don't have to go in and add all of these individually. They will be there for your enabling. Okay, so let's close this. Now let's go to the first question. Okay, so the first question, you can see here, if I clicked on edit, it's just showing me the page label. Do not put a lot of text in there because that's going to be part of your navigation across the top. And let me just give you a quick sample of what that's going to look like. So you can imagine here, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I put in here, this is the fun slide, this is the not so fun, it's not going to fit in, it's going to overlap, and it's going to look ugly. So keep this very, very brief. Okay. So let's go to, and now here I've got a standard text display. Okay, so I've just put in here general interest level, and this was just kind of a spacer at the top, and then I had two questions, each were side by side at 50% apiece. So the first one was a drop down. As I said, try to use drop downs as much as possible. You'll notice here that I've got a yes, no. This is an important thing. I know it's going to be tempting to use a checkbox for yes, no, but remind all the ACCs here that with a checkbox, a check or an unchecked box are of equal value from a data standpoint. So if you put input required on a checkbox, then, and a person leaves it empty, well, that's a no, right? So that isn't going to work. And I've had people call me and say, I said input required, and it's like, no, what you actually said is check required. Okay, and so that's why in this case, a yes, no would actually require an answer because a blank would be the absence of that. Okay, so here I asked the question, are you focused on selling and supporting ACT products? Okay, input required, yes, no, and by the way, I'm just typing in yes, I am hitting no, and I'm typing in. That's as tough as it is to build a drop down. Okay, and third, maybe, but I've diversified my focus. Okay, now the options here allow multiple selections. So if you want them to be able to select more than one, I'll show you what that looks like. And then allow free form. Now this is useful because previously it would be yes, no, and then there would have to be a separate field for, if you there wasn't an answer above. Here you can just say allow free form text so that you can allow, and you can allow the selection of any or more of the values there, or you can just type your own answer right over it. Okay, so that way you're eliminating the need to put in a separate field if there isn't any relevant answer there for you. Okay, now this next one here is just strictly yes, no. you can see here the alias is Q2. Now the reason that we have the alias here is because we need to be able to identify them for triggers. Okay, now let's get into triggers. So here is where I will create a new page. See this little plus sign, create a new page, create a new question, create a new trigger. Well, this text part isn't really a question, but it's what you say. I'm going to create a new question, and I'm going to just have it as text display like it is here, or image display, empty space, or summary. And I've just disabled it. Okay, so I've added these 3 questions, but in fact, there's really only 2 with space filler. So then I've said, okay, let's create some triggers. Okay, well, take a look at this. Q1, which is here. Okay, are you focused on selling and supporting ACT products? Well, the trigger is if they say no, you're done. Submit form, thank you very much. And it breaks them right down to the end of the, what else are you going to say? If this is a channel survey, I got nothing more to say to you. Okay, I'm not here to convince you to make career changes. If you've, if you have said no, we're kind of done. Okay, now let's go to question 2. Okay, so question 2, are you interested in selling Linktivity Linktivity products through ACT? If you answer no, then you could advance them to a specific page. So go to, you can have submit form, show message, modify follow-up option, add contact to a particular group, or set variable. Okay, but I'm going to say go to 3, and I'll set or go to a page and I'll say 3. Now this, in this case, is the next page, but I can actually go to any page in the survey based on whatever it's covering. Okay, so we've got that covered. So that makes sense for question 2. And then question 1, if they pick yes and yes, I want them to go to page 4, because question 3 or page 3, what are your concerns about selling Linktivity? Okay, obviously that doesn't apply if they say yes and yes. So in this case, it jumps them to 4. Now you've heard me use the expression skip logic before. That's skip logic, where you are setting in triggers or logic based on how they answer a question and then advancing them to a different part of the survey that's relevant to that answer. Okay, so it's a dynamic, just like we've done with forms in the past. This is not subjecting them to questions that aren't relevant to them. Okay, and obviously, if you do that, you're going to have a higher completion rate because people don't have to sift through irrelevant information. Okay, and now I can click on here, Linktivity webinars. Have you watched the Linktivities? Yes, blah, blah, blah. I don't really care about the specifics of this, okay, as much as the structure. So now I can go to here, general interest level. How would you rate your level of interest? Now, again, I can advance people to this, or this can just arrive in a specific sequence. But the last one, okay, parting thoughts, general comments, click continue, please only click continue once, and then I can have an image. I can load images throughout the survey, either for appearance's sake or for illustration's sake. I remember I did one with survey, and I showed the ACT diag dialog box showing them which version of SQL they had. Okay, so now let's go up to the top and let's click on Sandbox. So I have created this survey and I am playing around with it to test the logic. Now in Sandbox mode, you just have to put 1 and 1 on each of them because it's not writing data. It is going to expect that data is there. Okay, so, and then little things like, okay, the following is a survey of ACT channel partners, blah, blah, blah. And then I would suggest that you tell people how long it's going to be. Now, in this case, I put, here was the image that you saw me put before. I can, once I'm done this Sandbox session, I can save it. okay, here, and I can retrieve it if I had previously saved ones. But I'm going to click on continue. And wait, let me just take a quick sip. We are getting our internet improved. While we're waiting for this, let me just open mics here. Yep. Any questions at this point, guys? Okay, groovy. Okay, so here we are advancing. You can see that this circle is solid, and you can see that we've advanced this far, and we are at page 2. So are you focused on selling and supporting ACT products? So watch what happens when I click on no. You know, based on what you saw, I should go right to the end of the survey. Boom. Thanks for showing up. Now let's go back here. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to click on. When you see this here, you have slow internet, which I do. Let me just do a quick refresh. Okay, so now I'm going to click on yes and yes. And you can see now I've jumped to the 4th page. See, this isn't solid because I've skipped over it. Okay, but the people can see that their rate of progression is now at the halfway point. Okay, now have you watched any of the Linktivity recordings? And then here is where you can see the multi-select. Which Linktivity products interest you the most? You select each one of these will then appear in the field and expand dynamically vertically, okay, based on however many you select. So these are all kind of being populated as tagged items. You can put in here all of the above, okay, and now you can continue. So now it's advancing you to this one. What appeals to you most about selling Linktivity products? Okay, I'm going to say I get credit for my tiers. What concerns you about selling Linktivity products? Just say the learning curve. Okay, and now I'm clicking on continue. Okay, yep, what's not to love? You know, this where you can actually put in a default. Okay, and those are all I need. Thanks. Advances to this. Now this, what I'm showing you is basically, you know, different ways of answering. So this is called a slider. Okay, so that, and this is especially useful on mobile, okay, where people can just use their thumb, or like this, okay, and they can complete the survey and go here. Okay, so this is what that question looked like. Okay, that last page that I was showing you before, and I can just enter in here and then just click on continue. Now the beauty of this is I have managed the navigation of this without writing to the database because it's in sandbox mode. But let's take a look at something here that I wanted to show you guys earlier here. And let's expand. Okay. So I've got yes, no here. Let's say that I want to add an additional one. Okay. I'm going to say I want to know all the people that are interested in selling Linktivity products. So I don't want to just advance them to the survey, but I want to actually identify them in my database. So I'm going to click on a trigger, and I'm going to click here. So I've added a new trigger, and I'm going to say question 2, answer yes. So that is the profile that I want to identify in my database. Okay, so this is, I've now harvested, I've segmented these people, but how do I capture those people? So what I can do is I can say modify follow-up options. So if I'm going to get and now this is a bit of the opposite, where let's say person put no, I have no interest in doing that, then I may want to modify the follow-up option, say do not schedule a follow-up activity because why? Okay, let's say that Matt Robillard fills this out, okay, and I had a question where it says, are you a Robillard? Yes, no. I can say, do not schedule a follow-up because who needs to talk to Robillards? Okay. What I can also do, okay, is I can say add contacts to a group. Now, previously I showed you how all the respondents will be grouped under one survey group. But if you want to create a separate group, okay, that is specific to, this question, then you can create it here, okay, and then even create group. This was something that, God, I wish AMA can do that, where you can actually create a group right from within the interface. Okay, now you're probably wondering, is this all the groups in the database? No, it is all under the keystroke Linktivity parent group. There's an option when you first set it up where it says, organize all of your groups under, your workspace group. So it creates one workspace group, and then it will create all of the surveys, all the events, all the forms, and then subgroups after that. So it's showing me all of these, and then I can create a group here and say, okay, people interested in Linktivity. That group is created instantly in Act, and now anyone that says yes to this question will be added to that group. Now, obviously, it's a little trickier to, create scheduled follow-ups when there's already a follow-up, but if you want to add let's say a list sync for AMA, you can be alerted of every person that, answers, yes to this question. And this is where I talk about where it builds in lead triggers. So if you may have like a whole survey, but you've got one question that's going to identify that respondent as a lead, okay? And that's where you can have the survey literally segment those people, okay? And that is a walkthrough of editing it. The other ones here, set variables, I'm not going to get into the variables, but if I wanted to just create a new one, I'll just kind of walk you through that. Okay, we're going to call this Robillard, and I hope I spell it wrong. Okay, I think I got it right. That's too bad. Okay, so what it's doing at this point, okay, is it's created it. I've got no category. It's created it. I will say here, test the, yep, it's available. So now it has saved. Okay, I can add in a picture. Okay. Okay. Now, if it's a bigger image, it will take a little bit to load up, or maybe I just misfired. Did I misfire? Let's do this. There it is. I misfired. Okay, so now, and if I want to remove it, I click on here. The footer text, as I said, closing text. Okay, show all pages. Here's all the check boxes I talked to you about. Okay, and look at here. Assign contacts to is automatically created a group called Robillard. I'm going to delete that from the database right after this demo. Okay, but if I thought, oh, okay, this isn't what I intended, I wanted Robillard leads, then I can click Browse Group. Okay, and I can scroll down to another one here. Okay. Same scheduled follow-ups activities that we've discussed. And then I will go into, this is, what it does is it shows you, okay, you see how all of these are enabled by default? Okay. Now it's going to save it. It's going to collapse it. Every time you save it, it always collapses it. Now it's going to create one question for you as kind of a placeholder. Okay. So I'm going to click on here. So this is just a text display. Okay. Which of the fruits, following fruits do you like or have you tried? It's showing you how this is formatted. You can either delete these, overwrite them. It makes no difference, but it's showing you this as a drop down, open-ended, which is a memo field, and a checkbox. Now, as I said, if you put input required, it isn't going to work. Okay. I mean, it's not going to work. Let me put it, it will work as it's supposed to. It's not going to work as you expect it to. Okay. Because the checkbox, checked or unchecked, is still valid. Okay. Now, at this point, I'm going to click on save. So I've got one question. I am getting new internet soon. I'm looking forward to it. But what I'll do here is, while I'm waiting for it, I can create a new question by clicking on question here. Now, what I'll do is I'll say, it's just some nonsense from a Roblar. It's not worth repeating. Scott A. Will these Linktivity products be built into the APC interface? Yes. So as I mentioned, you may have asked this question before. This is going to be much like AMA, where it's built into iframes within the APC interface. Okay. I imagine it will eventually have the same thing within the premium desktop, or it will be available right away. I'm not really sure of that. I've mostly been working on the website. Okay. So now you can click here. I can click on question. I will say, we'll call this, okay. Actually, sorry, not question, page. Okay. And then it creates a new page. And then within this, I create questions. Okay. And additional questions and additional questions. And then I can add triggers. Okay. And that's basically, and every time you save it, they're all going to collapse for kind of easier navigation. Now, if you screw up the order, you can always just grab the handles here and move them around. Okay. Now, that's about all we got time for on the question structure. In terms of the customization, you've got the default, which we've been showing you, compact, which basically uses less space, and it's useful. One of the bigger things is that it will have fewer section headers, and it will put the field labels as hints inside the label, so it's using less space. And then the wizard is actually just a design schema that just laid out a little prettier. Okay. And then the final customization here is showing you, you can change color of submit buttons, change colors of fonts, borders, thicken borders, have watermarks, okay, have the form width, which by default is 960 pixels, have a background image, set the opacity of it so you can, create a, a lighter or darker watermark image, so on and so forth. Okay, and then you can change the template names, do whatever. But that's largely all that it takes. So you can create surveys that people can take, you distribute them as links, personalized or otherwise. It will allow you to harvest data. It will allow you to skip over questions that aren't relevant based on people's previous answers. And all of that data will get written back to ACT and provide you a reporting page as well for you to either export or review the results that way. Okay. But that's it. Like there's nothing else that integrates with ACT out on the survey market. Nothing. Okay. It's been no effort whatsoever to write the ACT, and now there doesn't need to be. But here's the thing. When you are talking to customers, and this is why I covered in my original slideshow, all the different industries, if you start introducing this technology, it's not like they're not going to know what you're talking about. SurveyMonkey is a $3 billion company, so we're well past the proof of concept stage. Surveys are, a well-established business tool. So If you can introduce this to them, show them what the competitive products cost, show them that this is free, show them that it's included with Act Advantage. Not only is it going to make it stickier, it's going to make those premium accounts that much easier to move over to Act Advantage, where we get ongoing commissions. Okay. So I hope this has been useful. Let me just, before I sign off, Bud, thank you for your comments. Any questions? Let me just make sure that I've given people the ability to comment here. I think, yeah, I've allowed Mike. So if any of you guys have any questions, one last private message. Can this be used to get permission to send marketing emails, or is the survey itself possibly spam? So Scott, I would probably, I mean, certainly, what I would say is use a web form instead of a survey. Okay, and then what you can do is have a checkbox that writes to the a permit email checkbox back into your database. So if that gets enabled, then from your database, and you can actually, as you know, just set the audit history so that you'll have a record of when those people gave you that permission. Okay, so just by putting a simple checkbox, they click on that, it will update that check field in your database, add them dynamically to your marketing thing, and also by putting in the record history on that field, you'll get a time and date stamp of when that permission was given. Okay. Anything else? Will you be able to use this in chat? Very interesting question. What you can do is, at present, right now, we send out forms, but I would say this year we're also going to be able to, we should be able to, because that's on a backlog item, where within the chat session, link to chat, you'll be able to send out automatically a customer satisfaction survey. Right now it's structured as a web form, but absolutely that's a backlog item where they can send this out as a survey as well. Good question. Okay, guys, I have a meeting in 7 minutes, so I'll take this opportunity to wish you all a great weekend. Thank you for turning up, and I hope this was of value. Take care.